The sheriff didn't just lock himself in the deepest cell, he threw away the key. When the deputy walked in, he found him staring blankly out the window. He begged the sheriff not to do anything stupid, but the sheriff went ahead and said those forbidden words anyway.
I want to go out.
Because no one who'd ever said them had lived to tell the tale. You see, in this future world, humanity had been driven underground. Down here, there was one ironclad rule. Anyone who said, "I want to go out," would be forcibly sent to the surface to perform cleaning duties. But everyone who went topside ended up dead, poisoned by the toxic wasteland above. Still, the sheriff said those forbidden words without hesitation. His wife Allison's mysterious death 3 years ago had left him with nothing to lose. That day, Allison had stood up in the cafeteria and shouted that the outside world was actually full of green grass and blue skies. The ruined wasteland they saw on their screens was a lie. The leaders had doctored the footage to keep everyone trapped down here, forever stripped of any hope of escape. When no one reacted, she shouted those forbidden words.
I want to go out!
And so Holston, both sheriff and husband, had no choice but to personally escort her to the surface. The silo's residents watched Allison's exit through a live feed. After she stepped outside, she used a wool cloth to wipe the silo's camera lens. Everyone got excited, thinking maybe the outside world was finally survivable. But she only made it a few steps before collapsing, unable to move. People's hopes were crushed once again. But only the sheriff knew that before she left, Allison had told him that if the outside world was safe, she'd turn back and clean the camera. So there had to be another reason for her death. To uncover the truth, the sheriff also said those words, "I want to go out." And so Mayor Jans suited him up in a hazmat suit and sent him out. He climbed the long staircase toward the surface world. When the silo door opened, he was stunned by what he saw. The surface was exactly as Allison had described. Green grass, blue skies, even birds flying overhead. He desperately wanted the people in the silo to know the truth. So he ran back toward the silo's camera with everything he had and wiped the dust off with his wool cloth. But the screens inside the silo showed the complete opposite. What the people saw was him walking into that same wasteland. They watched him make his way toward Allison's body. After just a few steps, he felt dizzy and disoriented. The sheriff suspected the real toxin might be hidden inside his hazmat suit, so he did something no one had ever done before. He took off his helmet. But his condition had already deteriorated badly, and within moments, he collapsed next to his beloved Allison. Hope for survival outside was crushed yet again. But one woman realized that the sheriff must have had a reason for removing his helmet before he died. It turned out that just the night before, Juliet had taken the sheriff to an abandoned tunnel entrance. Inside, they found the walls covered with strange drawings and writing. She seemed completely unfazed by it all. Then she led the sheriff through a hole in the wall to a platform. When she turned on the lights, they saw an enormous drilling machine. She figured the machine had malfunctioned while digging downward, which was why previous inhabitants had sealed this place off with concrete. She and the sheriff climbed down a ladder along the wall. From a small box, she pulled out a camera, then felt their way forward along a fishing line. Eventually, they pulled out a cloth bag from behind a metal plate. Inside was the hard drive Allison had discovered, along with her handwritten notes from when she'd cracked it. The hard drive contained footage of the real world outside, as well as her research. The sheriff immediately wanted to take everything and destroy it, but Juliet wasn't having it. She yelled that if the sheriff had listened to Allison, maybe she'd still be alive. Hearing this, the sheriff froze. Allison had always been his burden to bear. The sheriff hesitated. He told Juliet to keep a low profile because if the leadership found out about this stuff, they'd both face execution. Then he took the hard drive and the decoded notes and left. Later, Juliet heard that the sheriff had been exiled to the surface. She immediately returned to the platform. Turns out she'd been hiding something from the sheriff. There was a passage below the lower level. She'd come to investigate. The area below was completely flooded. She'd always had a fear of deep water, but with everything that had happened, she couldn't let that stop her now. After securing the rope and putting on her headlamp, she slowly climbed down. Halfway down, her nerves got the better of her, and the headlamp fell into the water. She had to feel her way down in complete darkness. Just as she was about to reach the water's surface, the generator in the cylinder above suddenly malfunctioned. As the person in charge of the generator, she rushed back immediately. She found her apprentice about to go in and fix it, and Juliet immediately stopped him. When he insisted on going in anyway, she decked him with one punch. After the generator crisis was averted, her supervisor came looking for her. He chewed her out for being drunk, missing 2 hours of work, and beating up the apprentice who idolized her. But Juliet brought up something deadly serious. The silo's generator had major problems and needed to be shut down to be properly fixed. Her supervisor said the generator had never been shut down in the silo's entire history. It would plunge tens of thousands of people into darkness. Even 5 minutes of darkness would cause mass panic. He couldn't take that kind of responsibility. Juliet insisted that a brief blackout was better than total generator generator failure, which would mean the end of the silo. In the end, orders from the top meant they could only do basic patchwork repairs. Just then, the generator suddenly surged with high voltage, causing violent tremors throughout the lower levels. And as luck would have it, Mayor Johns had just arrived there. Learning about the generator malfunction, the experienced Juliet decisively entered the generator to make repairs. Thanks to her work, she successfully restored normal pressure. Mayor Johns had witnessed Juliet's competence firsthand and gave her his stamp of approval. He immediately decided that Juliet would inherit the sheriff's position and become the new sheriff. But she refused without a second thought, saying she was fine staying on as a mechanic. The next second, the mayor handed her a sheriff's badge and said this was the late sheriff's dying wish. When Juliet arrived at the office to accept the appointment, she found the mayor's body. Since the silo's equipment wasn't sophisticated enough, there was no record of who the killer was. If word of Mayor Johns' death got out, it would definitely cause riots. According to silo regulations, Bernard from Judicial temporarily assumed the position of mayor, and Juliet, newly appointed by Mayor Johns, took on the responsibility of finding the real killer. She was assigned to work in the former sheriff's office. Juliet noticed the ventilation duct in the room kept making strange noises. Just then, Bernard showed up with a change of clothes for her. Even though she'd been made sheriff, not everyone accepted her. After all, she'd just been a laborer on the lowest levels of the silo. Bernard had always believed she'd committed theft back when she was down there. But given the late mayor's personal appointment, Bernard couldn't say much. On her first day, she found a note on her desk, but before she could figure out what it meant, her deputy burst in. He told the sheriff that someone down below was beating up a citizen. Turns out the deputy had been secretly having an affair with the mayor. He suspected that a thug from the lower levels who sold fake medicine had killed Mayor Johns. But without solid evidence, Juliet just dragged him away from the scene. Then Juliet went straight to the recycling center to look for the former sheriff's belongings, especially the hard drive and decoded diagrams they'd found. But the worker said they hadn't found any of that stuff when they cleared out his things. Meanwhile, Robert from Judicial showed up at the deputy's room and said the department head had decided to remove Juliet from her position as sheriff. The deputy decided they could wait and observe because once Juliet became unpopular enough, she'd resign on her own. But that night, when he returned to his room to sleep, a mysterious man burst out and grabbed him in a chokehold. Luckily, with decades of police experience under his belt, he managed to break free. But when he went back to his bedroom to grab his shotgun, he found it missing. The mysterious man was behind him, pointing the shotgun right at him. Meanwhile, Juliet returned to her quarters and heard strange noises coming from the vent fan again. So she opened it up and discovered a fishing line with a metal ring hanging from it. Following the line, she slowly pulled a bag of documents out of the vent. Juliet was going through files when someone suddenly started pounding frantically on the door. Without a word, the man outside handed her a note. It read that the deputy sheriff had been murdered at home, but by the time she arrived as sheriff, the others had already cleaned up the scene. On top of that, they'd already found some civilian from the silo to take over as deputy. Just as Juliet was about to speak up, Bernard cut her off. His concern wasn't about finding the killer. It was about keeping the silo's residents calm and maintaining order. After they left, Juliet immediately searched the deputy's room. She stumbled upon a note in his pocket. It was the deputy's list of suspects in Mayor Johns' murder investigation. She stuffed the clue into her pocket and headed straight to Bernard's office. Juliet wanted to jump into the investigation right away, but Bernard didn't seem the least bit concerned. He even casually picked up the former mayor's juice and took a sip. His mind was clearly on how to smoothly step into the mayor's role. That's when Robert chimed in with a suggestion. Declare both deaths accidental, hold a single funeral, and bury them together in one grave. It would not only divert public attention, but also spin a touching story about two elderly companions. But when the funeral actually took place, everyone just stood there completely stone-faced.